What's going on, you guys? It's your boy Patrick, aka Addicted to Combat, and we are back for another week of best bets and props where I go over all of my bets placed for this weekend's UFC card, which is the return to Brazil at long last. UFC 283, big pay-per-view featuring two championships on the line. Light heavyweight, the vacant title at 205 between Glover Texeira and Jamal Hill, and we've got in the co-main event the quadrilogy match, the fourth time these two have squared off at flyweight for the belt. Davison Figueiredo, Brazil's own reigning defending champion, against Brandon Moreno, the interim and former champion at flyweight. Very fun matchups. I've got 7 money lines on this card, so I've got a lot of betting action to go over. Some I like, some I don't like. I'll be honest about the spots where I think I've got a good edge and the spots where I think you could have gotten a better price or just stayed off of this bet altogether. But 7 money lines, 1 prop for me. But I'll be going over additional props at the end of the show as well that I like. There are quite a few on this card. I think the props are a good option this week. Go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel if you have not. Let's keep this thing growing this year. And check out BetUS Sportsbook, who's a partner of this channel. They've got great lines on mixed martial arts, including a couple of money lines. And the key prop that I played this week is on BetUS, where there's a better price than any other spot on sportsbooks I've seen on the market. So be sure to check that out and use Addicted to Combat 125 as the promo code. If you're a new customer looking for a new sportsbook, they'll match your initial deposit up to $2,500 by 125% using that promo code Addicted to Combat 125. You can check out that information in the description. So moving on to the first money line of the night, I've got Terrence McKinney to defeat Ismail Bonfim, minus 115 on Terrence McKinney's money line. I paid that price to win 1 unit, and it's just the deal about experience in the UFC already. Terrence McKinney's been there, done that, set records at lightweight for the fastest finish in a debut and in the division over Matt Frivola, who's a great opponent. He's gone on to have the battle against Drew Dober, which was his only loss so far in the organization. But he's come back. He's kind of matured. His last performance, he was a big favorite over Eric Gonzalez. But you saw Terrence McKinney, do what he does best, get into a firefight early, try to get an under 1.5 round finish. But it started to go against him. He got tagged by Eric Gonzalez, so Terrence McKinney went to his base, which actually is not striking, it's wrestling. And that's a key difference in this fight. Ismail Bonfim is actually an explosive striker and an explosive fast starter, just like Terrence McKinney. 8 round 1 finishes of Bonfim's own. But in a debut, McKinney's got the explosivity kind of covered. He's the better man in that arena. He's proven himself. But if Terrence McKinney can mature a little bit, go for the route of least resistance, go for the wrestling, because Bonfim has been submitted in all of his losses as a professional. So I think the ability to be more versatile, go from striking fast early in the match to wrestling and getting that round 1 submission, that's how I see Terrence McKinney winning this fight. So it is a little sketchy. Terrence McKinney has not been to the scorecards in his professional career, but I don't think he'll have to once again and defeat this debuting fighter in Ismail Bonfim. So I like that money line. Not wagering a whole lot, just paying that minus 115 tag to win 1 unit on McKinney. The next money line I have is somebody I've bet on 8 times already. I've bet on Gregory RoboCop Rodriguez, all of his performances since the Dana White Contender Series, where he was unsuccessful. Both of his victories in the LFA and all of his spots now in the UFC, where he's gone, I believe, 4-1 or 5-1, I forget. He's doing quite well, Gregory Rodriguez, and he's taking on a debuting fighter, debuting Brazilian off of the Dana White Contender Series, Bruno Ferreira, on short notice. Rodriguez was supposed to fight the UFC veteran Brad Tavares. Tavares got injured. We got Bruno Ferreira making a short notice debut spot against a very tough competitor in Rodriguez. Rodriguez has got Bruno covered everywhere here. Size, durability so far, UFC experience, the ground game is just unparalleled. And I really do think that the fact that Bruno Ferreira has not been to the scorecards or even outside of 1.5 rounds, that's a key difference here as well. Not that I expect this fight to really go much past halfway through a 3-round fight, but if it does, I think Rodriguez's cardio is going to hold up here. So what I did was I played 2 units on Rodriguez's money line at minus 286 on BetOnline. It actually dipped. He was a minus 350 favorite for a while when this opened. It moved on BetOnline down to minus 286, so I put 2 units on that, and I put 1 additional unit on BetUS. The inside the distance on BetUS for Rodriguez is minus 165. That's still up there now. I think BetOnline, it's like minus 210. Bovada, it's about minus 225. So to get Rodriguez to win inside the distance at that price is a very good line because, like I said, Bruno Ferreira never made it outside of, I think, 1.5 rounds as a professional in his 9 bouts. And 13 wins for Rodriguez, 11 of those are by finish. So it's a spot where I think Rodriguez wins most of the time by knockout or submission if it goes that route. Bruno Ferreira, again, talking about the submissions and the groundwork, he's a guy who really needs to slam his opponents to the mat and work the ground and pound to get a knockout. And I think he's going to be too small to get in range, too lacking in the grappling to compete with RoboCop. So clear spot for RoboCop. He is one of my more confident picks on this card. So those are the spots I have, the money line and the inside the distance prop. Up next is my favorite underdog play of the card. This is Mounir Lazzez to defeat another debuting Brazilian. Gabriel Bonfim is making his debut. 13-0 record, 13 finishes. This guy's never been to the scorecards and only been past round 2 twice in his professional career. 25 years old, so he's still learning, still maturing, but a very talented striker is Gabriel Bonfim, the brother of Ishmael Bonfim, who's fighting Terrence McKinney. So Mounir Lazzez, a 3-fight veteran of the UFC, gone 2-1 in ththose appearances, and the one loss was to Warley Alves by very crafty body strikes. I think his ribs got injured in that fight. Mounir Lazzez, he was TKO'd early into that fight against Alves, but that's the only time he's been stopped. And going up against a guy in Gabriel Bonfim, who kind of relies on a finish to win, that's not a good look against the UFC veteran so far, who's going to have the reach advantage, match the size of Gabriel Bonfim, have a lot more experience at 35 years old, but not be past his prime at welterweight. He's got proven toughness and a proven cardio ability to go 15 minutes in a fight, kickboxing the whole time. The wrestling is not great from Mounir Lazzez. I think he's got enough defensive wrestling, but not enough offensive wrestling to really compete in that arena. I think he wants to keep the standing where he can outpoint Gabriel Bonfim to a 3-round decision is how I see this going. So I gotta say, Lazzez is a crafty striker, good striking at range. His kickboxing distance management is pretty good, and then up close he will, plant his feet, trade in the pocket. He's not afraid to get hit, but at the same time he's technical enough and he uses elbows and knees up close. So I like what I see from Lazzez. I would line this fight pretty even, like a 50-50, but you're getting plus 158 on Mounir Lazzez where I got it. I put 1 unit on him. I'm still seeing anywhere between plus 140 to plus 155 on Mounir Lazzez. And I know so far these 3 past money lines I've talked about, all debuting fighters. So I'm sure one of these guys will come through, but as long as I get the majority of them correctly, I'm not too worried. But we'll see what debuting fighter does surprise us here. But I think Mounir Lazzez has got a lot of value on his money line here at this underdog price. So that's who I'm taking, just 1 unit to win 1.58. Okay, this next money line is one where I do not advise you play this. This is not something where I think there's a huge edge over the bookies on, but I am playing 1 unit at minus 190, Ihor Potieria to defeat Mauricio Shogun Rua, the Brazilian legend who's 41 years old now and trying to ride off in the sunset and retire in a victory in front of his home crowd. Now, this is not something that happens very often in the sport's history. Usually when guys are legends, they fight and they fall from grace, and it's very sad, and they usually go off on a string of losses. And that's what's happening with Shogun Rua, in my opinion. I mean, this guy was grizzled 15 years ago when he made his debut, coming over from Pride, where he kind of peaked in his early to mid-20s, did Shogun Rua. He came into the UFC battling knee injuries, shoulder injuries, countless surgeries. I mean, this guy has been, a shadow of himself and inconsistent for a long time. This retirement fight, the end of his contract, is long overdue. And all I need to bet on a guy like that is just a warm-blooded fighter who's got a size advantage, a 15-year youth advantage, a speed advantage, a power advantage at this point. And I see all of that in Ihor Potieria, who is 0-1 in the UFC. He lost back in the summer of last year against Nikolai Negumereanu. Ihor had a fast start, but he got out-wrestled and then kind of just outpaced in that fight and standing TKO'd in round 2. He looked good on the Contender Series, but before that, a very padded record. So I don't think Ihor Potieria has very much of a ceiling in the UFC, but I do think he wins this fight. And the other side of this bet is I'm a huge Shogun Rua fan. This guy's a legend, somebody that is just iconic for the sport that I've watched my entire life since his Pride days. So this goes one of 2 ways. Either I win money or I see a legend that I adore in Shogun Rua ride off in the sunset, get that miraculous moment that never happens in the sport where a guy can retire in front of his home crowd. in a victory. It rarely ever happens. And if Shogun wins, I guarantee you that he will fight again until he loses and goes off on a string of losses. But either way, that's how it's going to happen. I see this beautiful sports moment on Saturday, or I win money. So I like that bet for that purpose. It's a very practical reason that I don't expect anybody else to understand or even tail. So proceed with caution, but only 1 unit on that minus 190 on Poteria to win. I think he gets it done by round 1 knockout, So moving on to a pretty equally risky bet. This time I'm betting on a Brazilian, but Johnny Walker to beat Paul Craig, 1.85 units I've wagered to win 1, minus 185 on Walker's money line. It's what I got, and this guy's got the size advantage, the power, the striking. Neither him or Paul Craig usually get too far outside of 1.5 rounds. The majority of their fights end within 1 round. And Johnny Walker, the problem I have with him is his risky style. Basically, he doesn't have the chin to back it up. But against Paul Craig, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu master, the grappling specialist, he's not a guy who's really knocking anybody out, with the strikes. He did finish Shogun Rua, made him tap to strikes. Again, that's kind of going towards my bet on Poteria. But talking about Johnny Walker here, he does have a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt coming off of a submission win in his last fight. I don't want Walker to play that game with Paul Craig, but it at least shows that he's got the jiu-jitsu background to recognize a dangerous position and to stay out of that. Now, Walker should get this done. He should be able to knock out Paul Craig within a round and a half. I would imagine that's all it would take. But Johnny Walker, we've seen him out-grappled before, and his fight IQ, it's in question. This Brazilian crowd might really razz him up. He seems like a very extroverted guy, Johnny Walker, so that might make him, take risks he might not normally take. That could benefit him. He could land like a flying knee or some crazy elbows in the clinch and then the fight. Or he could do something wild and get his arm trapped in the guard of Paul Craig and get tapped out. I don't quite know. So banking on the fight IQ of Johnny Walker is a reason why I don't like this bet. But for every other reason, I think that Johnny Walker should get the knockout here. So like I said, 1.85 units to win 1 on Walker's money line over Paul Craig. And moving on to the co-main event, flyweight championship defended by Deiveson Figueiredo against Brandon Moreno. These guys are no strangers. In fact, for Deiveson Figueiredo, this is the 4th time in a row he has fought against the same opponent, Brandon Moreno. So last year they fought in January. Deiveson Figueiredo won the belt back in a decision victory, and I think he does that performance and then a little bit better this time in front of his own hometown. So this guy, I've got minus 110, complete pick'em price tag, 2 units. You could do better on that price tag on Figueiredo. He's at plus 105 on a lot of books right now as an underdog. And you might want to wait until after the weigh-ins tomorrow morning. See if this guy is trembling on the scale. See if he looks terrible. See if, he can barely move, if he's made of stone. But his weight cut looked like it was going well in the weeks leading up to this as far as social media is concerned. But he's a guy, you got to think about that. He had weight-cutting issues in the past when he lost to Brandon Moreno in the second fight. Now, this is not a huge edge over the market. I think Deiveson Figueiredo should win this fight maybe, 60% of the time, a little bit more than that. I think he's going to have the bigger moments. He's got that equalizer, the power. Moreno we saw in the last fight, Moreno can actually outstrike him on the numbers in the round. But Figueiredo can win moments. He can hold control time in the clinch, threaten with the wrestling and the takedowns. He's got a very tight guillotine he can threaten with as well. And he's just got that power in his feet and his hands. His boxing is a little bit, lower volume than that of Moreno, but he got the knockdowns in the last fight, and that won him the fight. I think he does even better in this performance. At 35 years old, he's starting to reach the limit of his peak at this weight class, but I don't think he's over the hill just yet. So I'm riding with Figueiredo, but again, I will admit, at this price tag, minus 110, even at plus 105, I don't think you're getting the biggest edge that you could possibly get. We've seen these guys fight 3 times before. All things considered, they've gone win, loss, and draw against one another. So that tells you that it's a very even fight. So you don't want to pay an even money price tag on an even fight. You're not getting an edge. You're playing at the bookies, the sports books price tag, right? You're flipping coins. So I will admit that for 2 units at minus 110, not the best bet in the world, edge-wise, but I do think Figueiredo wins more often than not, especially in front of his hometown crowd in this title fight, and still is how I see this fight going down. Probably Figueiredo by decision. And that moves us along to the main event title fight, where I've got my final money line number 7, 2 units on Jamal Hill to defeat Glover Teixeira and become the new light heavyweight champion. Minus 115 is where I got that money line at. So another slight favorite, almost a pick-em price tag on Jamal Hill. Money has come in on Hill as the week has gone on. He's got the size, the youth, the power, the technical striking in this fight, and the guy is so much younger at this spot. 43 years old for Glover Teixeira. Retirement has got to be on the horizon for this guy, which is another red flag here. So I would imagine Glover Teixeira would be thinking about retirement if he won this fight, got his title back a second time in his 40s in front of his home crowd, but I don't see it happening. Glover Teixeira used to have very good striking, but his speed, his combinations have kind of diminished over the years in his old age. His cardio has diminished a bit. Jamal Hill shows very good qualities as far as just, the heart of a champion, just the tenacity, the never quit. We talked about Paul Craig earlier against Johnny Walker. Paul Craig is a guy who broke Jamal Hill's arm, and Jamal Hill didn't tap out. The ref had to stop the fight. So this guy is willing to go to great lengths to win a fight and to hang in there as long as he can. And I really do think that the striking of Jamal Hill is something special. He's going to be way faster, have way more output and way more accuracy against Glover Teixeira, and I think he puts Glover Teixeira out under 2.5 rounds in this fight. But otherwise, he does show that in his last fight against Thiago Santos, it took him until round 4 to defensively grapple Thiago Santos, and he still had the power to put Thiago Santos out in round 4. So, although I think this finishes earlier rather than later, I think Jamal Hill does have the power to be able to last, the power and the cardio to be able to last into the later parts of a fight and still win. He was prepping for Anthony Lionheart-Smith, who's a great grappler. So Jamal Hill has been practicing his defensive BJJ. He's competent there. I think he'll at least be able to last against some of that threat if he does end up on the ground underneath Glover Teixeira. So it's a spot where, the age is really a huge determining factor in my choice in this fight. Not very often do you see a 43-year-old come back and have yet another peak in their career, win the belt back at that point against the younger man who's more physically imposing and just a way faster man. So give me Jamal Hill, 2 units at minus 115. I like that spot quite a bit on this card. Moving on to some props that I do like on this card, but I'm not playing personally. I do like on the prelims Luan Lacerda to defeat Cody Stamann by submission. Ultimately, and in most worlds, I think Cody Stamann should win this fight with his experience and his wrestling and his striking advantages. But Luan Lacerda is a BJJ specialist, and there's no shame in his game. He wants to grab that single leg, take you to the ground, and his submission prop is somewhere around plus 400 to plus 500 on some books. I think that he is sub or bust. The large majority of Lacerda's victories come by submission. I think that if he wins this fight, it'll be by submission. Cody Stamann does have that thing about him where he's a wrestle boxer, collegiate wrestling background. Most of his win equity is actually getting this fight to the mat and getting control time, ground and pound, things like that. That's going to put him in danger of being submitted by the smooth transitions from submission to submission chained together by Luan Lacerda. So I think his money line for Lacerda basically is that plus 400 submission prop. I don't see many other ways that he wins the fight. The striking is night and day between these two, and I think Cody Stamann could actually knock out Luan Lacerda if Lacerda starts getting desperate, can't get those takedowns, and in the later parts of a fight, rounds 2, rounds 3. I think the opportunity for a counter, the counter or a knockout is going to present itself for Cody Stamann. So the under 2.5 in this fight, I also like. Plus 190 to plus 200 for the under 2.5. Along the lines of that submission prop on Lacerda, I like the submission prop for Gilbert Burns as well. And it's something that Neil Magny has struggled with time and time again. He gave up 15 minutes of control time to Michael Chiesa over a 5-round fight. He's been submitted by guys like RDA. He's been grounded by pretty much every high-level grappler that there is in the welterweight division that he's faced. So for Gilbert Burns to be able to threaten with the power on the feet and then also have the high-level wrestling to get the fight into his arena on the ground, it'll be the path of least resistance for Gilbert Burns to do so and not stand at range striking with the long physical advantages of Neil Magny. Makes sense, and I like that Gilbert Burns by submission prop. It's around the plus 200 range for Gilbert Burns to win by submission. When you compare that to the high money line of Gilbert Burns at minus 475, that's a good way to discount that, I would say. Burns winning inside the distance would not be a bad bet in this fight. Minus 125 to cut down that minus 475 money line. Neil Magny, not a guy that gets finished that often, but he's been getting rocked in his recent fights. You can tell he's kind of at the end of his peak at welterweight, and this is a high-level opponent with dangerous hands, dangerous power, Gilbert Burns, and like I said, the ability to get this fight to the mat and employ that high-level BJJ game. There's a lot of violent spots I like on this card, but let's start off with some that I think are going to go to decision. That is the Figueiredo-Moreno fight. I think we've seen a lot of data on these two guys that show that they're very evenly matched, very defensively sound against one another, and very technical guys. So for this to go over 2.5 rounds at minus 300, not bad. Over 3.5, minus 190, not bad at all. And the over 4.5, almost going to decision, minus 155 in Figueiredo versus Moreno. Now for some unders I like. There's 3 under 1.5s I do like on this card. One of them, of course, is the Terrence McKinney versus Ismael Bonfim. Both of these guys have a lot of round 1 finishes. Terrence McKinney is just the under 1.5 king at this point. Minus 220 is the price tag on this fight to not see 7.5 minutes plus of action. I don't mind that. I think it's a likely outcome. The next violent spot I like is the under 1.5 for Paul Craig versus Johnny Walker. That is at minus 180. I think it's a very fair price on this one. 205-pound division. These guys pack either power or the ability to get the fight to the mat and submit their opponent. So very binary fight like I broke down on the money line pick I have on Walker. But, I mean, very few fights I've seen the scorecards of these two guys. 5 out of a combined, I think, 48 professional fights between these two have ever even seen the scorecards. So very few. Many of them have not seen the over 2.5 round mark, and most of them ended inside of round 1. So very good price on the under 1.5 in my opinion. Big weight class. Walker's got, fight-ending power. Paul Craig has got the ability to lock up a submission with the quickness. So I like the under 1.5 there for Craig and Walker. The final violent spot I like is the under 1.5 in the Gregory Rodriguez-Bruno Ferreira fight. I think out of the 9-0 record of Bruno Ferreira, none of them have seen over 1.5 rounds. And for Gregory Rodriguez, it's very similar. So many finishes on this guy's record. I believe 11 out of 13 are finishes. Most of them in round 1 or under 1.5. So these two guys seem keen on meeting each other in the center of the cage and probably getting into some sort of a firefight. Rodriguez loves to engage in those spots. But if it goes to the mat, both guys have proven to have a pretty good ability to mount and get a ground and pound stoppage as well. So I think it's on the table for both guys. Most likely, I think it's Rodriguez who does get that round 1 finish. But another under 1.5 at minus 180, that's a very good price. So I like those violent spots. Now, I'm not usually a guy to play under 1.5s, but there's a lot of spots here where I think it makes sense by the numbers. So there you have it, you guys. That's all of my betting action for UFC 283 and recommended props. I do have 7 money lines on this card and 1 prop. So it was like 3 about even to pick 'em price tag money lines, 3 favorites, and then 1 underdog in Lazez. So let me know in the comments what your best bets and props are for this card. Any juicy parlays you guys have cooked up, or just ways to make money on this card in general. Even whatever fight you're excited to see, I'd love to hear it in the comments. So sound off down there. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, and I will talk to you guys very soon. Also, check out on Blood Money MMA Bets channel on Saturday, a couple hours before the fight starts. I will be on there talking, last-minute fight stuff with Johnny K. Picks, Cody. I believe we've got Kyle Miller from Never Hedge, and we've got Ben the Bane Davis as well on there. So I'll be joining all of those guys, just talking fights, shooting the shit before the fight starts. So check out Blood Money MMA Bets. Subscribe, of course, if you live under a rock and you have not subscribed to him or Johnny K. Picks, my boys. And I'll talk to you guys very soon. Enjoy the fights. It'll be great to see that Brazilian crowd. Cheers.